And now I want to get to the juicy part, so to say, how do we fight this? Because, and I want to say that I think for our viewers it's important to know that you're a stubborn person. I mean, we have no common dream. We have no common utopia. We have the worst form of capitalism. We have precarity that does not allow people even to stay together in the same space, to say, because they all work part-time jobs here and there. So what you say is that, well, we have to look for resistance, resilience, and a way to fight back somewhere else. We have to find another source. And I find this to be very optimistic in a way on your part, because when you see so much reasons for being pessimistic, it's good to see that someone thinks of someone else. Well, we are in a bad position. Let's think of a solution. Let's think of reasons to be resilient somewhere else. And that somewhere else is interesting to see that you find it not in a bloody revolution, not in some sort of utopia, but you see it as small measures being taken against competition and against the idea of us being so dependent on a job for our living. This is what you want to overcome. And it's important to see here that you find two sources of problems right now. First of all, the advancement of technology that would allow us to aggregate companies and to develop ourselves and to decommodify a lot of our activity, first one. And that is in contrast with the fact that this Uberization and this apparent freedom led to more self-exploitation, actually, to longer working hours. And this is the first contradiction. And the second one is that we have less and less good jobs and less jobs at all, but we are more and more dependent on a job. So these two elements you find here could be some sort of radical change. And I want you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Thank you, Maria. Let me try to rethink, my whole proposal. It's always good to talk. When you talk about something, it comes together in a different way than when you write. So let's start from the fact that capitalism has never been in a worse shape, indeed, in terms of the pressure it puts people on. And so you're right, you presented very well my position that there is no utopia, there is no revolution in the offing, but we live in a very interesting moment when, in fact, all of these competitive pressures have alienated the majority of people from that kind of life, even the winners. And I have looked at surveys and I have interviewed, the winners. They, first of all, let's focus on the winners first to see what is the support of to capitalism. All these millionaires that I've read interviews with, well, they're in the game out of insecurity. They have, these people usually have an education that has kind of nurtured them to love leisure time. They consume culture, they value their families, so their value system makes them hate the kind of economic activity they have to be trapped in order to be winners. So even if they win at the game of competition, they do not like the process and they stay in the process simply because they are afraid to stop and to exit. So this is where my actually hopes are based on, that never before in the history of capitalism we have had so many of the winners, of the purported, of the obvious winners, actually being alienated from the system. Why? Because they're no longer protected with their job security, with their ownership status. Now, most companies are publicly listed, so they are open to the precariousness of the investment of millions of people. So the ownership structure does not protect the owners. And when everybody's life is both so insecure, but you have to stay in that game, otherwise you might never be able to come back or survive, then you start hating your life. No wonder there is so much mental disorders and mental instability among the rich. You know, poor work-life balance. A lot of work-related stress has been registered among the well-employed, you know, those with the envious jobs. So this is one feature of contemporary capitalism that is very hopeful, that even the winners hate the game. Now, what do we do with that, though? Right? Because we cannot just tell them, hey, look, admit it, you hate capitalism. Let's go to, you know, let's shift to socialism. We don't use those labels. We don't have to use, these labels are alienating. So strategically, we should not use them, all the way knowing that people are against the pressures that are coming from the competitive production of profit. And this is the basic characteristic of capitalism, the competitive production of profit. So from the point of view of analysis, I can say there is an anti-capitalist wave, because people know that what is driving them crazy, it is the competitive production of profit. But purely strategically, we should not use those terms. And probably that is why instead of, in a lot of writings now, people blame neoliberalism rather than capitalism, although it's the same thing. It's just capitalism extended to its full extreme. But because people are afraid of that label, heavy label capitalism, they call it something else. It's a euphemism, euphemism for capitalism, liberalism. So that's first step, to realize that across the left and the right, across this my divide between the risk and opportunity, that even those who are supporting the opportunity poll in elections, in fact, would, if they had that chance, would vote for a party to give them a different life, a different everyday existence that is disconnected from these competitive pressures. The next step is to see what political party could actually phrase that alternative, because we cannot say, well, people should just self-organize. It just doesn't work like that. So we need to have a political force that would espouse or accept those ideas and propose them. And currently we do not have such a force, nowhere. As to the two contradictions of capitalism that you mentioned, yes, I call those the two contradictions of contemporary capitalism, and they're creating the problem, they're not creating the solution. They're creating the problem, but let's see, maybe there are solutions actually lurking there. The first contradiction is that in terms of the development, what Marx would call the development of the means of production, right? The digitalization, the massive technological progress we have. We, at least Western societies, but probably the world, has the means to create the necessities of life without much input of labor time. That's clear. But at the same time, our political economy, also the rules of the game, are written in such a way as we depend more and more on jobs. But these technologies are taking away the jobs. So that's why We have the precarity. But we have the means to produce the essentials of life. So what was the second contradiction? So the first contradiction is that
we have less and less jobs, but then we are becoming more and more dependent.
More and more dependent.
And,
Right. So if this is, sorry?
Probably
go ahead.
One solution would be, okay, so I agree with Richard Wolff, we should have collectives, because that would give you a sense of importance. You would feel worthy in your workplace. He says that this is the main reason our state capitalist societies from the ex-Soviet bloc were doomed to fail, because they just reproduced a system where some people at the top told everybody else what to do, so we should democratize and so on and so forth. But what you say here, the competitive production of profit, that means we have to be competitive all the time. Our labor, our activity has to be productive, and profit is the only goal. So this is
so
this is a
exactly. If we want to change anything, we have to start from there. We have to start insulating our societies from those pressures. How do you do that? And I actually think that Trump has this intuition. Of course, he's articulating it and you know, badly and doing it badly. But the intuition is that to stop the pressures of the global economy. So we can do it in two ways. We can do it in closing down, in breaking down the global economy, like Trump is trying. But I think in our age and time, this is impossible because of their huge production chains. We cannot repatriate all production in our countries. It is just, would be, I believe that it's impossible. The other way would be to renegotiate globalization. So this is the path I believe is more feasible, because the European Union and the US still are the most powerful economic bloc in the world. So they have the capacity to call the shots. If the shots, but depends what the shots are. Until now, the shots they were calling were of neoliberal globalization, of free market exchanges, with a lot of pressure on the resources of nature and on labor. So we just need to rewrite these rules of global economic exchanges in a very high labor protection and very high environmental protection. That already would reduce massively the competitive pressures. Because if you have to produce your goods with high salaries, good protection, good workers' rights, that is going to make you rather uncompetitive, right? So you have to make everybody comply to those high standards, so that the competition is not based purely on price. Because when competition is on price, the way you do it, you repress wages and you exploit nature. But if you make it in the law for everybody, if this product is to be imported from China to the European Union, and it violates those ecological and labor standards, it's a no-go. So that would massively reduce the pressure. For me, this is the starting point, because even if we have workers' collectives and nationalization of all kinds of branches of the economy, but if we need to compete, we will continue pressure workers, and we will continue exploiting nature just to stay competitive with China.
Yes,
or other.
You discuss this in your book, that authoritarian capitalism, such as the one in China, is proving to be more efficient than the democratic capitalisms that we are used to in Western countries. The problem,
and because it's more competitive, see, it's contagious. Because when you compete, if you and I play tennis, and I see that you have some tricks that are making you a nice player, I start emulating those tricks. So if we compete with China, in order to compete successfully, we emulate, we copy the things that makes China competitive. And what makes China competitive is exactly oppression of labor and exploitation of nature.
I completely agree. Now, I see two problems here. First of all, the first problem would be that we somehow lost hope. And you talk this about the, I think you call it the legitimation matrix. That is, the government has to provide some deliverables, and it has to be accepted at some point by the citizens. And the problem right now, and I think you're correct in examining it, is that, look, we all want these things. We want a global government that would impose workers' rights and would hold accountable the major global corporations that are not obeying by the law. I mean, we have to have some sort of political entity that could keep up with the global entities, because otherwise we have local solutions to global problems, and the fierce competition would make us abandon those protections. But we think it is desirable, but we don't think it's feasible. We are so depressed, so pessimistic, that we don't find the right resources to demand from our governments that they do something about it. I think this is the main problem, that it is in our heads. We are like horses chained to plastic chairs, you know, because it is basically feasible, but we don't think it's feasible. And I think this is the major and the most disappointing thing that Margaret Thatcher ever achieved, by destroying hope that there is an alternative.
That's right. But I think there are signs that things are changing. First of all, the populations, let's say, of Europe, I cannot speak of everybody, but we have been told by our leaders, left, center right, that these things are not deliverable, that social security is not deliverable. We believe them because we've been told time and again that this is how the game is played, that if we want our economies to be competitive in the global market, we have to accept insecure jobs, poorly paid jobs, bad, cuts to education and healthcare and stuff like that. But it is easy to change the discourse, and in fact, the discourse has been changed. Look at I was very surprised that the European Commission, the new Commission, endorsed seriously this European Green Deal. And surprisingly, it came from the center-right. It is, let's admit it, it is an elite idea. If you ask everybody, I'm not sure that if we ask, democratically to people to vote on that idea, it's going to fly. It is an elite idea. It comes from a certain political elite, center left, center right, maybe a minority, but somehow they got the upper hand. They pushed through that against the pressure of businesses, even against the pressure even of trade unions, because trade unions are afraid that this is going to cost jobs. So when there is a powerful minority that has the means of decision making, and this is mostly how history has happened since Magna Carta and the due process and human rights in 2015. These were powerful elites that pushed for policies that served humanity. That's another topic, we can discuss that, but we could pressure. So what I believe is the way to go is that civil society can pressure political elites in that direction. And the direction should be not only Green Deal, but Green Deal with very high social protection.
Yes, of course,
So
and universal basic income, because you cannot escape the logic of the market if you are so dependent on a job. This is
yeah,
like wage slavery. You depend so much on that job. Your whole life revolves around that, and you
yeah,
cannot escape this logic of the market unless you have some stable income. And I don't think that that would be the case, and not tax the rich and fiscal paradises and end it now. I have found this
yeah,
is one of the key problems, because as you said, there is no problem with capitalism. It's a perfect money-making machine. Look how much wealth is being piled up in the fiscal paradises. It is the
yeah.
problem of redistribution, and the problem that um, it is not like John Maynard Keynes imagined that it would be such a time where we had we would have so much leisure, and we would work only 3 hours a day. No, we work like crazy, produce like crazy, and then give it to the 1%. And I find here to
Yeah.
be the major problem.
Um, well, is it though? um, if, yes, we have a problem with redistribution, clearly, but don't we also have a problem with the production of that wealth?
Yes, because it's
Because wealth, well, again, let's not be trapped in the paradox of emancipation. Because if we have something to object to the way the wealth is distributed, it implies that we like the wealth, that there's nothing wrong with the wealth, just with the distribution. So we, in order to escape the paradox of emancipation there, we have to remember that before it's distributed, wealth is produced, and scrutinize that process of production. And what I'm saying is the way we produce way too much wealth, how much more wealthy can our societies become? But the process of production is the wrong one, because it is directed not by you know by the way science creates wealth. The way science creates wealth is there is a human need, you satisfy it. There is an opportunity to advance science, you advance science. What capitalism does, it is driven by the profit motive. Where you can make money, you invest. So it is the process of production that is faulty. So this is where we have to keep our eye on. And even if that process of production is in the hands of the states, it can still become. You remember socialism? You know, it was polluting, it was exploitative, it was state property. We don't want that, do we? But people have forgotten. It seems like, on the one hand, people started hating socialism because the experiment with our totalitarian systems was so bad. But at the same time, some people hope that state ownership would be a solution to the problem. Well, look back at state socialism. So what was I saying is that even if we redistribute wealth, imagine that we stay with the same process of production that is based on massive precariousness, on pollution, on the exploitation of human beings and nature, and driven by the profit motive. But all of that wealth is evenly distributed. Okay, life would be better, but the problem would not be solved.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. My only point here, probably, and the only point where I disagree, is that we will see these changes soon in the future. I'm fear the worst. I fear very violent uprisings and very bad things happening, because the powerful never gave up power so easily, and the transition from feudalism to capitalism was marked by very violent events. The whole 19th century was dominated by very bloody revolutions. So I kind of fear that, because as I told you, the powerful ones never gave up their power just by thinking that would make a better society. So
that's right. But in the book, I'm exploring another trajectory. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm exploring this other trajectory, and let's see at least if it makes logically sense. Now, I agree that the powerful until now have never given up their position of power, exactly because they had the means to secure for themselves a nice life. What I'm saying is, what I observe is okay, forget about the 1%, but the people who are, let's say, in the top 20%, I mean, even they do not like the game at which they're winners. So I'm saying let's exploit that momentum, and maybe because of this, that the European Commission and the center right that represents those winners. In fact, I mean, these are usually businessmen and powerful, economically powerful actors of the center right. Even they are pushing with the European Green Deal. So for me, this is a sign that the powerful of the day want change. And when the powerful of the day are ready for change, then I'm hopeful. Then is the revolutionary moment for me. But the tactic, the strategy, my strategy for radical change, I call it subversion.
Yes, please discuss a little bit about it.
Okay, I call it subversion because it is not a revolutionary break, right? It is not, the poor and losers of the globalization game coming together with violence, taking over power. Actually, what I observe it's happening is that through policies that are targeting the competitive production of profit. And remember, capitalism is above all not about ownership of property. It's about what you do with that property. And it is about the profit motive. It is about the competitive production of profit. So any policy we can adopt that goes against the competitive production of profit is radical because it hits at the root of the problem. Marx, said radical means to take the thing out, to uproot it. So if we shoot at the very root of capitalism, we will subvert it. And this doesn't have to happen through a revolution. Actually, it's very unlikely to happen with a revolution, but it could happen with policies like I just discussed, like putting in the law very high environmental and labor protection. That would decrease so much competition. Or another policy, well, you said, indeed, I defend the universal basic income, because that would mean that people's livelihood is not dependent on the production of, on participation in that process. Insulate education and science from the market. Currently, scientific innovation is completely dependent on the market, and this is through law, through the European legislation. So we can disconnect all of this, unplug all these activities from the competitive production of profit, and that would be subverting capitalism from within. And this is already happening. I mean, European Green Deal, as much as it is criticized that it is not enough, I agree that it is not enough, but it is an absolute miracle that it is happening if we consider how many forces, both labor and capital, are against the European Green Deal. And yet, the European Commission is pushing through with it. What is going on? The winners, the rich, the elites, are pushing with something that is opposed by both labor and capital, that is very, very significant for me.
Yes, it is. I think it is very important. I will end up on this optimistic note that we have to end this type of competitive perspective, because even activism has become a competition. And it is very hard. I discussed this on numerous occasions with other guests on this podcast, that it is so difficult to fight capitalism while competing. I mean, if you take, for instance, Better Women, it's so good that they exist because we can win grants, you know, and we can study them. So we transform human suffering into a source of competition and profit. And this is one of the most perverse, I think, effects of this type of always competing against each other. And you also gave a quote from Engels that said that workers compete against each other, and this form of competition is very, very bad. And this is what we have to fight with and to fight against. Actually,
so, cooperation, not competition.
Yeah. Cooperation, not competition. Yeah. Thank you very much. If you have something to add, maybe something that I haven't thought about for our viewers as a conclusion.
Yeah, let's not give up hope, and let's not overlook the good things that are already happening. We have opportunities to grab there. Let's subvert. So my final word would be, let's subvert capitalism from within. We have the means.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you very much for this very
Thank you,
conversation. It was so nice talking to you.